There was a time, not so very long ago, when telephones did not ring. They screamed. They howled and hissed and crackled like restless spirits caught between worlds. If you had lifted a receiver in those early years, you might have heard a symphony of static, a chorus of distant voices bleeding into one another. And beneath it all, the strange mechanical wail of a system still learning how to carry the human voice across impossible distances. Tonight, as you settle into the quiet comfort of wherever you are, we will travel back through the decades and centuries to discover how a simple dream of connection grew into something that changed the world forever. The story of the telephone is, at its heart, a story about longing. It is about the deep human need to hear another voice, to feel less alone in the vastness of the world. Long before wires stretched across continents, long before signals bounced between satellites in the silent darkness of space, people yearned to speak to those they loved across the miles. They sent letters that took weeks to arrive. They waited by windows, hoping for news. And in that waiting, in that beautiful ache of separation, the seeds of invention began to grow. Someone, somewhere, believed there had to be a better way. Before we wander deeper into this gentle history, let me offer a small thought. If you find comfort in these quiet explorations, in these soft journeys through science and time, perhaps you might consider staying a while longer on this channel. A gentle tap of the like button, a quiet subscription, these small gestures help more than you might imagine. They allow us to continue crafting these peaceful nights together, building a library of calm discoveries for whenever you need them. But for now, let us return to our story, to the dreamers and tinkerers who first imagined voices traveling on invisible wings. To understand where the telephone came from, we must first understand what came before. In the centuries before electrical communication, human beings relied on remarkably creative methods to send messages across distances. Smoke signals rose from hilltops, carrying coded messages that could be seen for miles. Drums echoed through valleys and forests, their rhythms spelling out words in languages of sound. Flags waved from ship to ship, from tower to tower, creating visual chains of information that stretched across entire nations. Each method was ingenious. Each method was also heartbreakingly slow. The optical telegraph, a system of towers with movable wooden arms, flourished across Europe in the late 1700s. From Paris to the farthest corners of France, messages could travel in mere minutes, passed from tower to tower by operators who watched and repeated each signal. It was revolutionary for its time, yet it required clear weather, bright daylight, and an unbroken chain of human observers. On foggy nights, on stormy days, the entire system fell silent. Communication remained a prisoner to the winds of weather and the limitations of human sight. Something more reliable was needed. Then came electricity. In the early 1800s, scientists across the world began to understand this mysterious force that crackled through the air during thunderstorms and made hair stand on end when rubbed against certain materials. They learned to capture it, to store it in primitive batteries, to send it coursing through metal wires. And with that understanding came a profound realization. Electricity traveled fast, unimaginably fast, almost as fast as light itself. If messages could somehow ride along those electrical currents, distance would no longer matter in quite the same way. The telegraph emerged as the first child of this electrical age. Samuel Morse, an American painter turned inventor, developed a practical system in the 1830s that would transform long-distance communication forever. His device was elegantly simple. An electrical current sent along a wire could activate a mechanism at the other end. Short pulses and long pulses, dots and dashes, combined to represent letters and numbers. Operators learned this new language, tapping out messages that raced across the land at speeds previously reserved for lightning and dreams. By the 1860s, telegraph wires crisscrossed nations like iron spiderwebs. They followed railroad tracks across prairies, climbed mountain passes, and eventually dove beneath the Atlantic Ocean itself, connecting continents that had once seemed worlds apart. News that had previously taken weeks to cross the sea could now arrive in minutes. Stock prices, weather reports, declarations of war and peace all traveled at electrical speed. The world felt smaller, more connected, more immediate. Yet, for all its wonder, the telegraph had a fundamental limitation that troubled certain dreamers. The telegraph could carry words, but it could not carry voices. Each message had to be translated into code by a trained operator, sent across the wire, then translated back into words on the other end. The personal warmth of human speech, the subtle inflections that convey emotion, the intimate quality of hearing someone you love say your name, all of this was stripped away. What arrived was text, efficient and accurate perhaps, but somehow cold. Inventors began to wonder if there might be a way to send the voice itself, complete and whole, riding on those same electrical currents. The human voice is a remarkable instrument. When you speak, your vocal cords vibrate, creating pressure waves that ripple outward through the air like rings spreading across a still pond. These waves carry extraordinary complexity. The pitch of your voice rises and falls. The volume swells and fades. Harmonics and overtones blend together to create a sound that is uniquely yours, as distinctive as a fingerprint. To capture all of this, to encode it into electricity and reconstruct it at a distance, seemed almost impossibly difficult. Yet several brilliant minds decided to try. Among those dreamers was a young man named Alexander Graham Bell. Born in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1847, Bell grew up surrounded by the science of sound. His father was an expert in elocution, teaching people how to speak more clearly. His grandfather had been a renowned speech teacher as well, and his mother, Eliza, was merely deaf, communicating with young Alexander through a special form of visible speech notation. From his earliest years, Bell learned to pay attention to the subtle mechanics of how humans produce and perceive sound. This awareness would shape his entire life. Bell's mother's deafness was a constant presence in his childhood. She could hear a little when people spoke loudly close to her ear, but much of her world was silent. Young Alexander developed a deep emotional bond with her, learning to communicate through gentle touches and visual cues. He would press his lips close to her forehead and speak, allowing her to feel the vibrations of his voice resonating through bone. This intimate experience taught him that sound was not merely about ears and air, but about vibration, about physical movement, about the translation of invisible waves into meaningful sensation. As a teenager, Bell became fascinated with the idea of creating a machine that could replicate human speech. Along with his brother Melville, he built a peculiar automaton, a mechanical speaking head made of gutta percha, rubber and cotton, with bellows for lungs and a wooden tongue that moved within a carefully shaped mouth cavity. When they blew air through it and manipulated the parts just right, it could produce recognizable vowel sounds. Neighbors heard it crying out and thought a baby was in distress. The boys were delighted. They had proven that speech could be manufactured. Tragedy struck the Bell family in quick succession. Melville died of tuberculosis in 1870, and just the year before, another brother, Edward, had succumbed to the same disease. The family was devastated. Alexander himself began showing symptoms, and his parents, desperate to save their remaining son, made a dramatic decision. They would leave Britain behind and emigrate to Canada, hoping the fresh air of the New World might restore Alexander's health. In 1870, the Bells crossed the Atlantic and settled near Brantford, Ontario, beginning a new chapter far from everything they had known. The Canadian countryside proved restorative. Bell spent long hours walking through fields and forests, breathing deeply, regaining his strength. The quiet landscape gave him time to think, to dream, to imagine possibilities. He watched birds wheeling through the summer sky and wondered about the nature of flight. He listened to the wind sighing through pine trees and considered the physics of vibration. Far from the crowded cities of his youth, surrounded by the gentle rhythms of nature, Bell's mind began to wander toward the great problem that would consume his next several years. How might one transmit the human voice electrically? Bell soon moved to Boston, where he began teaching at a school for the deaf. His father's system of visible speech proved valuable in helping deaf students learn to produce sounds they could not hear. Bell was a patient and beloved teacher, deeply committed to his students' success. Among them was a young woman named Mabel Hubbard, who had lost her hearing to scarlet fever at age 5. She was bright, determined, and curious about the world. Bell found himself drawn to her intelligence and spirit. In time, their relationship would blossom into love and, eventually, marriage. While teaching by day, Bell spent his nights tinkering in a rented room, surrounded by wires, magnets, and strange experimental apparatus. He was not alone in his quest. Inventors across America and Europe were racing toward the same goal, each approaching the problem from slightly different angles. Bell's particular insight came from his deep understanding of acoustics. He envisioned a device where sound waves would cause a membrane to vibrate, and that vibration would somehow modulate an electrical current. The challenge was translating that elegant concept into working hardware. Bell found a crucial ally in Thomas Watson, a young machinist who worked in a Boston electrical shop. Watson had skilled hands and an intuitive grasp of mechanical systems. Where Bell could imagine and theorize, Watson could build and refine. The two men began working together in 1874, spending countless hours testing variations of their speaking telegraph. Progress was slow, filled with failures and frustrations. Devices would buzz and hum, but produce nothing resembling speech. Yet neither man was willing to give up. They sensed they were drawing closer to something extraordinary. The breakthrough came unexpectedly on a June afternoon in 1875. Watson was in one room, adjusting a reed on their experimental transmitter. Bell was in another room, listening at the receiving end. Suddenly, Bell heard something through the wire, not a click or a buzz, but a sustained sound, almost like a distant musical note. The vibrating reed had induced a continuous electrical current that traveled through the wire and reproduced itself on the other end. It was not speech, not yet, but it was proof. Sound could ride on electricity. The fundamental principle was sound. Months of intense work followed that summer discovery. Bell and Watson refined their apparatus, testing different configurations of membranes, magnets, and circuits. They worked through sweltering heat and bitter cold, often late into the night. Bell's health suffered from the strain, his eyes aching from close work, his nerves frayed by constant setbacks. Yet the vision of a speaking telephone kept him going. He knew that others were pursuing the same goal, that any day might bring news of a competitor's success. The race was on, and the finish line was drawing near. On the 10th of March, 1876, in a small attic room in Boston, the telephone spoke its first words. Bell was working with a new liquid transmitter, a device where a needle dipped into acidified water, allowing voice vibrations to modulate the electrical resistance. Watson was stationed in the next room, receiver pressed to his ear. Bell spoke into the mouthpiece, and what he said would echo through history. Watson heard it clearly through the wire. A human voice had traveled on electricity for the very first time. The world would never quite be the same again. The words Bell spoke were humble ones, a simple request for assistance. He had spilled some battery acid on his clothes and needed Watson's help. There was no grand proclamation, no carefully prepared speech for the history books. Just a practical sentence, spoken in haste, that happened to be the first ever transmitted by telephone. Perhaps there is something fitting in that, something reassuring. The great inventions of history often emerge not from dramatic moments, but from ordinary ones, from accidents and experiments and quiet afternoons in cluttered workshops. Bell filed his patent for the telephone on February 14, 1876, just hours before a rival inventor named Elisha Gray submitted his own design to the patent office. The timing would later become the subject of fierce legal battles, with accusations of espionage and corruption swirling around both camps. Gray's device used a water-based transmitter similar to Bell's, and questions lingered for decades about who had truly invented the telephone first. History would ultimately grant Bell the credit, but the controversy reminds us that innovation is rarely the work of a single mind. Regardless of the patent disputes, Bell worked quickly to demonstrate his invention to the world. In the summer of 1876, he presented the telephone at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia, a grand celebration of American innovation and progress. The device was tucked into a small corner of an educational exhibit, easy to overlook among the massive steam engines and elaborate machinery that filled the halls. But when the Emperor of Brazil, Dom Pedro II, lifted the receiver and heard Bell reciting Shakespeare from across the room, he reportedly exclaimed in astonishment. The telephone began to attract serious attention. Those early telephones were crude devices by modern standards. The transmitter and receiver were often the same component, a metal diaphragm that could both capture sound and reproduce it. Users had to shout into the mouthpiece and press it hard against their ears to catch the faint, tinny voices that emerged. There was no dial, no numbers to call. Each telephone was connected directly to one other telephone by a dedicated pair of wires. To speak with someone, you simply picked up the receiver, and if they were listening, you could talk. It was intimate, direct, and remarkably personal. The sound quality of those first telephones was far from perfect. Voices emerged thin and distorted, sometimes barely recognizable. Background noise crackled and hissed, the electrical equivalent of static on a poorly tuned radio. Yet, despite these limitations, people were captivated. There was something almost magical about hearing a familiar voice emanating from a small wooden box, knowing that the speaker was miles away. It seemed to shrink the world, to bring the distant near. For many who experienced it, the telephone felt less like a machine than like a small miracle. As word of the telephone spread, demand grew rapidly. Businesses saw immediate potential for coordinating operations across distances. Doctors imagined consulting with colleagues or reaching patients in emergencies. Newspapers dreamed of receiving reports from far-flung correspondents in moments rather than days. The challenge was infrastructure. Each connection required its own dedicated wire, strung from building to building, pole to pole. As the number of subscribers increased, the tangle of wires overhead grew thicker and more chaotic, transforming city streets into strange forests of copper and wood. The solution to this growing complexity was the telephone exchange, a central switching station where all the wires in a neighborhood converged. Operators stationed at the exchange could physically connect any two lines, allowing subscribers to reach one another without requiring a direct wire between every possible pair. The first commercial exchange opened in New Haven, Connecticut in 1878, serving just 21 customers. Within a few years, exchanges were appearing in cities across America, each one a humming nerve center of communication, staffed by rows of operators manipulating plugs and cords. The operators who worked these exchanges were almost exclusively young women. Companies found that female operators were patient, polite, and possessed voices that traveled well over the often distorted telephone lines. They were also paid considerably less than men, which suited the growing telephone companies just fine. These women became the invisible heart of the telephone system, connecting callers, handling complaints, and memorizing hundreds of names and numbers. They worked long hours at demanding jobs, their nimble fingers dancing across the switchboards, weaving the threads of communication that held communities together. Life as a telephone operator was demanding, but also offered opportunities that few other jobs provided for women of that era. It was respectable work, safer than factories, and required skills and training that commanded a certain status. Many operators took pride in their expertise, competing informally to see who could connect calls fastest or handle the most difficult customers with the greatest grace. They formed their own communities within the exchange offices, sharing gossip, advice, and the small dramas of daily life. The telephone was bringing people together in ways its inventors had never imagined. As we continue our gentle journey through telephone history, we come to the question of how these marvelous machines sounded in their earliest days. If you had placed a call in the 1880s, you would have been greeted not by a dial tone, but by the voice of an operator asking how she might direct your call. You would have spoken the name or number of the person you wished to reach, and she would have physically connected your line to theirs using a cord and plug. It was a deeply human process, mediated by real people at every step. The voices that traveled through those early wires were ghostly things, thin and wavering, often drowned out by strange electrical noises. Crosstalk was a constant problem, voices from other conversations bleeding through, creating an eerie chorus of overlapping speech. Sometimes you could hear distant fragments of strangers' lives, intimate words not meant for your ears. The boundaries between conversations were porous, the privacy we take for granted today almost impossible to guarantee. Yet people adapted, speaking more loudly, more clearly, learning to navigate this new acoustic landscape with patience and determination. Thomas Edison, already famous for his phonograph, made a crucial contribution to telephone technology in 1877. He developed a carbon transmitter that was far more sensitive than Bell's original design. Instead of a liquid medium, Edison's transmitter used carbon granules that changed their electrical resistance when compressed by sound waves. The result was clearer, louder voice transmission, making telephone conversations considerably easier to understand. Edison's improvement helped transform the telephone from a laboratory curiosity into a practical tool for everyday communication. The telephone industry grew with astonishing speed. The Bell Telephone Company, founded by Bell and his investors, expanded rapidly, building networks in city after city. Competitors arose, each claiming improvements or alternatives to Bell's original patents. Legal battles raged for years, with Bell's company defending its intellectual property against hundreds of challengers. The stakes were enormous. Whoever controlled telephone technology would control one of the most valuable industries in the modern world. Bell's patents were ultimately upheld, establishing his company's dominance for decades to come. By the 1890s, telephones were becoming fixtures in offices and wealthy homes across America and Europe. The devices themselves had evolved considerably from Bell's original design. Handsets combined the transmitter and receiver into a single unit that could be held to the ear. Bells were added to signal incoming calls, replacing the earlier need for shouting or whistling to get someone's attention. The candlestick telephone, with its tall central stand and separate earpiece, became an iconic symbol of the era. Communication was becoming more convenient, more accessible, more woven into the fabric of daily life. Long-distance telephone service presented particular challenges. Sound quality degraded quickly over extended distances as electrical signals weakened and accumulated noise with every mile of wire. In 1876, Bell and Watson had successfully demonstrated a call between Boston and Cambridge, a distance of about 2 miles. By 1892, the network had expanded enough to allow a ceremonial call between New York and Chicago, nearly 1,000 miles apart. Bell himself placed the call, speaking to his old partner Watson and recreating those first historic words from their workshop days. The expansion of long-distance service required innovation at every level. Thicker copper wires reduced signal loss. Repeater stations amplified voices as they traveled, boosting the signal at regular intervals. Engineers developed loading coils that improved transmission quality over extended distances. Each advancement pushed the boundaries of what was possible, extending the reach of the telephone network further across the continent. By the early 20th century, a coast-to-coast call was within reach, a feat that would have seemed like pure fantasy just a generation before. In January of 1915, the first transcontinental telephone call connected New York City to San Francisco. Alexander Graham Bell, now in his late 60s, placed the call from New York, speaking once again to Thomas Watson, who waited on the other side of the continent. The conversation traveled through thousands of miles of wire, across mountains and deserts and farmland, a triumph of engineering and human determination. Bell remarked that it felt strange to be speaking to someone so impossibly far away. The country had become, in a sense, a single room. The technology that made transcontinental calling possible was the vacuum tube amplifier, developed by Lee DeForest and others in the early 1900s. These glass tubes could take a weak electrical signal and boost it enormously without distortion, allowing voices to travel distances that had previously been impossible. Vacuum tubes would prove essential not just to telephony, but to radio, television, and early computers as well. They were delicate and power-hungry, but they unlocked a new era of electronic communication that would transform the 20th century. As the telephone network grew, so did the complexity of managing it. The number of possible connections between subscribers increased exponentially with each new customer. What had started as a simple point-to-point system was becoming an intricate web of wires and switches, too complex for any human operator to navigate entirely from memory. The industry needed a better way to identify subscribers than by name alone. The solution was elegantly simple. Each telephone would be assigned a unique number, and callers would specify that number to reach their intended party. Moving gently forward in our story, we arrive at one of the most distinctive sounds in telephone history, the rotary dial. Before the rotary dial became common, all calls were connected by human operators. You would lift the receiver, wait for the operator to answer, and tell her the number you wished to reach. She would then physically plug your line into the correct socket, establishing the connection. It was personal, but it was also slow, expensive, and dependent on the availability of trained workers. As demand for telephone service grew, a more efficient method was urgently needed. The automatic telephone exchange was the answer. Developed by Almond Strauger in 1891, this mechanical marvel could route calls without human intervention. Subscribers would use a dial to send a series of electrical pulses corresponding to each digit of the number they wished to call, These pulses would activate mechanical switches at the exchange, stepping through a series of positions until they reached the correct destination line. The system was noisy, clanking and whirring as it worked, but it was also remarkably reliable. The age of the automated telephone had begun. Legend has it that Stroger invented his automatic exchange out of frustration with the local telephone operators. He was an undertaker in Kansas City, and he believed that a rival undertaker's wife, who worked at the telephone exchange, was deliberately routing calls meant for his business to her husband instead. Whether this story is entirely true remains uncertain, but it captures something important about the era. The telephone was becoming too essential to leave in the hands of potentially unreliable intermediaries. Automation promised consistency, fairness, and privacy that human operators could not always guarantee. The rotary dial itself was a mechanical wonder. Each digit required the user to rotate the dial to the appropriate position and then release it, allowing a spring to return it to its resting state. As the dial returned, it opened and closed an electrical circuit, sending a precise number of pulses down the wire. 1 pulse for the number 1, 2 pulses for 2, and so on up to 10 pulses for 0. The clicking rhythm of those pulses became a familiar sound, a kind of mechanical music that accompanied every call for decades. There was something satisfying about using a rotary phone. The weight of the handset in your hand, solid and substantial. The smooth rotation of the dial under your finger, the gentle resistance of the spring, the soft clicking as it spun back. Each call began with a small ritual of physical engagement, a moment of mindful attention before the connection was made. In our age of instant touch and swipe, it is easy to forget how different this relationship with technology once felt. There was a deliberateness to it, a pace that matched the unhurried rhythms of an earlier time. The spread of automatic exchanges happened gradually. Many communities retained human operators well into the 20th century, particularly for long-distance calls and in rural areas where the infrastructure was slow to arrive. Operators remained essential for directory assistance, helping callers find numbers they did not know, and for special services like person-to-person calls, where you would only be charged if the specific person you wished to reach was available. The transition from human to machine was a gradual dance, with both partners sharing the floor for many years. As telephone networks expanded, a peculiar new sound entered the acoustic landscape: the dial tone. This steady hum, heard when you lifted the receiver and the line was ready for use, was actually an invention of necessity. In the early days, there was no way to know if the exchange was ready to receive your dial pulses. You simply picked up the phone and started dialing, hoping everything would work. The dial tone provided assurance that the system was listening, ready to receive your input. It became one of the most recognizable sounds of the 20th century. Alongside the dial tone came other signals that would become deeply familiar to generations of callers. The busy signal, that rapid series of short tones indicating the line you were trying to reach, was already in use. The ringback tone, a longer, slower rhythm that meant the call was going through and the other phone was ringing. The fast, busy signal that suggested something was wrong with the network itself. Each sound carried meaning, a vocabulary of tones that telephone users learned to interpret without conscious thought. The telephone was teaching us a new language. The ringing of a telephone became one of the defining sounds of modern life. In the early decades, phones did not ring in the electronic sense we know today. They used actual mechanical bells, struck by a small hammer activated by the incoming electrical signal. The sound was bright and insistent, impossible to ignore, cutting through the ambient noise of home or office to announce that someone, somewhere, wished to speak with you. Families would race to answer, children competing to be the first to grab the receiver and hear who was calling. For all its convenience, the telephone also introduced new anxieties into daily life. Unlike a letter, which could be answered at your leisure, a ringing phone demanded immediate attention. It interrupted dinners, woke sleeping children, and intruded upon quiet moments of rest. Some people found the telephone exhausting, a tyrant that refused to respect boundaries between public and private life. Others embraced it fully, welcoming the constant possibility of connection. The telephone was reshaping not just how we communicated, but how we structured our time and our relationships. In another quiet corner of this story, we find the telephone becoming a fixture of everyday American life during the middle decades of the 20th century. By the 1950s, nearly half of all households had a telephone, and the device had shed much of its earlier mystique. It was no longer a marvel to be wondered at, but a tool to be used, as ordinary as a toaster or a lamp. Yet this very ordinariness marked a profound transformation. The telephone had woven itself so deeply into daily routines that life without it had become almost unimaginable. The party line was a common arrangement in many communities during this era. Multiple households would share a single telephone line, each assigned a distinctive ring pattern so they could recognize their own calls. Privacy was limited on a party line. Anyone on the shared circuit could listen in simply by lifting their receiver quietly. Neighbors sometimes became inadvertent eavesdroppers, overhearing conversations not meant for their ears. The party line fostered a curious blend of community and caution, reminding people that even the most private conversations might have an unseen audience. Teenagers discovered the telephone as a lifeline to their social worlds. In the years after World War II, adolescent culture flourished, and the telephone became essential to its rituals. Long conversations stretched through evening hours, tying up family lines to the frustration of parents waiting for important calls. Young people would talk for hours about nothing in particular, the connection itself more important than any specific information being exchanged. The telephone had become a medium for intimacy, a way to maintain bonds with friends and romantic interests between the hours of face-to-face encounter. The telephone also transformed the world of business. Salespeople could reach customers without traveling, orders could be placed instantly, and decisions could be made in real time across great distances. The pace of commerce accelerated. What once required days of correspondence could now be accomplished in a single phone call. Office buildings filled with rows of desks, each equipped with its own telephone, creating new landscapes of work where information flowed continuously through networks of voices and wires. The modern office was born, shaped as much by the telephone as by any other technology. Area codes were introduced in the 1940s and 50s to manage the growing complexity of the telephone network. As direct, long-distance dialing became possible, callers needed a way to specify not just a local number, but a geographic region. The North American numbering plan divided the continent into zones, each assigned a 3-digit code. Suddenly, a familiar local number could be preceded by unfamiliar digits that conjured distant cities. 812 might evoke southern Indiana, 212 the bustling streets of Manhattan. Geography became encoded in numbers, a new kind of poetry hiding in plain sight. The telephone booth became an iconic feature of urban landscapes during the mid-20th century. These small enclosed spaces, usually equipped with a folding door and a light that activated when you stepped inside, offered privacy and shelter for public calls. You would drop a coin into the slot, hear the satisfying clink as it registered, then dial your number and speak. The telephone booth was a democratic technology, allowing anyone with a dime to access the network regardless of whether they owned a phone at home. Cities sprouted clusters of these glass and metal boxes on busy corners. Long-distance calling remained expensive for most of the 20th century, a luxury reserved for special occasions. Families separated by miles would schedule calls in advance, gathering around the phone at an appointed hour to share news and hear beloved voices. Rates dropped significantly after evening and on weekends, so Sunday afternoon became a traditional time for long-distance conversations. People spoke quickly, conscious of the meter running, trying to compress affection and information into affordable minutes. Distance still cost money, even if it no longer cost days. The telephone company, particularly the Bell system in America, became one of the largest and most powerful corporations in the world. For most of the 20th century, the Bell system operated as a regulated monopoly, controlling virtually all telephone service from coast to coast. This concentration brought standardization and reliability, but also stifled innovation and kept prices higher than they might otherwise have been. The company's iconic Bell logo appeared on phones, trucks, and buildings across the nation, a symbol of communication that was simultaneously reassuring and slightly oppressive. Telephone design evolved throughout the century, reflecting changing tastes and technologies. The heavy black bakelite phones of the 1930s and 40s gave way to more colorful models in the post-war years. Princess phones in pink and white appeared in teenage bedrooms. Slimline models promised modern elegance. The traditional heavy receiver yielded to lighter handsets that were easier to cradle between ear and shoulder during long conversations. Each generation of phones carried its own aesthetic, its own feel in the hand, its own particular memories for those who used them. Answering machines appeared in homes during the 1970s and 80s, transforming the relationship between caller and recipient. No longer did a ringing phone demand immediate response. You could screen calls, listening as the caller left a message before deciding whether to pick up. You could receive messages while away from home, returning to a blinking light that promised news or connection. The answering machine introduced asynchronous communication to telephony, a small revolution that presaged the voicemail systems and text messages that would follow. Time itself had become more flexible. As we drift gently onward through our story, we come to a moment of profound technological change. In the 1960s, a new kind of telephone began to appear in homes and offices, one that would gradually replace the familiar rotary dial. The touch-tone phone used buttons instead of a rotating disc, each button producing a unique pair of tones when pressed. These tones could be transmitted much faster than the mechanical pulses of a rotary dial, and they opened new possibilities for interacting with automated systems. The future was beginning to announce itself, one beep at a time. The switch from rotary to touch-tone was not immediate. Many areas continued to use pulse dialing for years, and some telephone exchanges could not process the new tones at all. For a time, phones were manufactured that could switch between pulse and tone modes, accommodating the patchwork of old and new infrastructure. Eventually, touch-tone became universal, but the transition stretched over decades. Change in technology rarely happens overnight. It ripples outward slowly, meeting resistance here, finding acceptance there, until one day the old way simply fades from memory. Touch-tone dialing enabled something entirely new: interactive voice response systems. Banks began offering services where you could check your balance by pressing buttons in response to recorded prompts. Airlines let you confirm reservations. Businesses created menus of options that callers could navigate without ever speaking to a human. These systems were efficient, but also occasionally maddening, trapping callers in endless loops of recorded messages. The telephone was becoming smarter, but not always wiser. Automation brought convenience and frustration in equal measure. The cordless telephone appeared in homes during the 1980s, liberating callers from the tether of the coiled cord. For the first time, you could walk freely around your house while talking, carrying the handset from room to room, even stepping outside onto the porch or into the garden. The base station connected to the phone line and communicated with the handset via radio waves. Early cordless phones had limited range and sometimes picked up interference from other devices, but the freedom they offered was intoxicating. The cord that had bound us to the wall was finally cut. Caller identification technology emerged in the late 1980s and early 1990s, changing the dynamic between callers and recipients. A small display on the phone could show the incoming number before you picked up, allowing you to decide whether to answer. The anonymity that had characterized telephone communication for over a century was beginning to erode. Callers could no longer hide behind the mystery of the ring. The balance of power shifted subtly toward the person receiving the call, who could now choose to engage or retreat based on the identity of the caller. The breakup of the Bell system in 1984 reshaped the American telephone landscape. Antitrust action by the federal government forced the giant monopoly to divide into separate regional companies, opening the industry to competition for the first time in decades. New carriers emerged, offering alternatives for long-distance service. Prices began to fall. Innovation accelerated. The unified system that had connected the nation for so long fragmented into a competitive marketplace. Some mourned the loss of the old order, but most welcomed the lower costs and greater choices that followed. Fax machines proliferated during the 1980s, using telephone lines to transmit printed documents between distant locations. Though not telephones themselves, fax machines shared the network and competed for the same lines. An office might have one number for voice calls and another for faxes, or use a single line that switched between modes based on the incoming signal. The distinctive screech of a fax handshake became another sound in the telephone symphony, a mechanical wail that announced the arrival of printed words traveling as electrical signals through the wire. Modems transformed telephone lines into conduits for data during the personal computer revolution. By converting digital information into audio tones that could travel through the voice network, modems allowed computers to communicate across distances. The early internet grew through these connections, dial-up modems screeching and hissing as they established links. Telephone lines that had been built to carry human voices were now carrying something entirely new, the digital whispers of machines speaking to machines. The infrastructure of communication was being repurposed for purposes its builders had never imagined. The mobile telephone began its journey from science fiction to everyday reality during the latter half of the 20th century. Early car phones, bulky and expensive, appeared in the 1960s and 70s, serving primarily wealthy executives and emergency personnel. These devices were essentially radio transceivers connected to the telephone network through operator assistance or limited automatic systems. They hinted at possibilities to come, a world where the telephone would travel with you wherever you went, untethered from buildings and wires entirely. The first truly portable cellular phones appeared in the 1980s, though they were hardly pocket-sized. These early mobiles were heavy bricks with long antennas carried in shoulder bags or briefcases. They cost thousands of dollars and offered limited battery life, but they represented something remarkable. For the first time, ordinary people could make and receive calls from almost anywhere within the coverage area. The telephone had broken free from buildings entirely. You could walk down the street, sit in a park, or stand on a beach and still reach out to connect with anyone in the world. Gently moving into the final decade of the 20th century, we find the cellular phone transforming rapidly. Each new generation of devices grew smaller, lighter, more affordable. What had been a luxury for executives became accessible to ordinary consumers. By the mid-1990s, millions of people carried mobile phones, flipping them open to check messages or make calls during lunch breaks and commutes. The pace of adoption was astonishing. A technology that barely existed a decade earlier was suddenly everywhere, changing patterns of social life in ways both obvious and subtle. Text messaging emerged quietly as an unexpected use of mobile networks. Short message service, originally designed for network operators to send alerts to subscribers, was discovered by users as a way to exchange brief written notes. Teenagers, in particular, embraced texting, developing rapid thumb-typing skills and cryptic abbreviations to fit messages into the limited character counts. A generation that had grown up talking on phones found a new way to communicate, one that was silent, discreet, and somehow more casual than voice. The telephone was learning to carry written words once again. The ringtones of mobile phones became a form of personal expression. Early phones offered simple monophonic melodies that users could select from preset lists. Soon, polyphonic tones allowed more complex music and eventually actual recordings of songs. People chose ringtones that reflected their tastes, their moods, their sense of humor. The standardized ring of the landline, that bright mechanical bell, gave way to a cacophony of personalized sounds. Buses and waiting rooms became impromptu concerts, each incoming call announcing itself with its owner's chosen theme. The arrival of the smartphone in the early 2000s marked another revolution. These devices combined the functions of a telephone, a computer, a camera, and countless other tools into a single handheld package. Touchscreens replaced physical buttons. Applications could be downloaded to extend capabilities endlessly. The phone became a portal to the internet, a music library, a navigation system, a gaming console. What had begun as a device for voice communication had evolved into something far more complex, a pocket-sized window onto the entire digital world. Social media platforms found their natural home on smartphones, always present, always connected. People could share updates, photographs, and thoughts instantly, broadcasting to friends and strangers alike from wherever they happened to be. The boundary between private life and public performance blurred. Moments that might once have been experienced and forgotten were now captured, shared, commented upon. The telephone had become not just a tool for connection, but a medium for constant documentation, a witness to daily life that never looked away. Video calling, once a dream of science fiction, became commonplace in the smartphone era. Families separated by continents could see each other's faces in real time. Business meetings could include participants from around the world, each visible in their own small window. The telephone had finally fulfilled the vision that innovators had imagined since the earliest days of the technology. Not just voices but faces could travel across the wires, or more accurately, through the invisible waves of wireless networks. The dream of presence at a distance was finally, imperfectly, realized. The landline telephone, that faithful fixture of 20th century life, began a slow retreat during the smartphone era. Households that had once centered their communication around a phone mounted on the kitchen wall found that mobile devices served all their needs. One by one, families disconnected their landlines, keeping only mobile numbers. The distinctive ring of a home telephone grew rarer, replaced by the personalized tones of individual devices. An era was quietly ending, the shared household phone giving way to personal communicators that each family member carried alone. The smartphone transformed expectations about availability and response. Where once a missed call might go unreturned for days, now immediate responses were anticipated. The device that promised connection also created new pressures, a sense that one should always be reachable, always responsive. Some people found this constant connectivity exhausting, yearning for the boundaries that physical separation once provided. Others thrived in the always-on environment, relishing the ability to maintain relationships and conduct business from anywhere at any time. The telephone had become both liberation and leash. Voice assistants emerged as a new interface for telephone technology. Instead of pressing buttons or tapping screens, users could simply speak their requests. Call my mother. Send a text to David. What is the weather tomorrow? The telephone responded to natural language, understanding context and intent in ways that would have seemed magical just a generation earlier. The device had come full circle in a sense, returning to voice as its primary mode of interaction, though now the voice was addressing the machine itself rather than another human being. The cameras embedded in smartphones grew increasingly sophisticated, transforming everyone into potential photographers and videographers. Moments could be captured instantly and shared across the world in seconds. The telephone had absorbed the functions of the camera, the video recorder, and the photo album, becoming a comprehensive tool for visual memory. Some worried that the constant impulse to document was interfering with the experience of living, that people were watching life through screens rather than engaging with it directly. Others saw the camera phone as a democratization of image-making, empowering ordinary people to tell their own stories. In yet another quiet chapter of this unfolding history, we might pause to consider how the telephone has changed the way we experience emergencies. Before widespread telephone access, summoning help in a crisis required physical movement, running to neighbors, driving to town. The telephone made help available at the press of a few buttons. Emergency services developed standardized numbers that anyone could remember and dial in moments of panic. The telephone became a lifeline in the most literal sense, connecting those in distress to the assistance they desperately needed. The telephone transformed long-distance relationships in profound ways. Couples separated by work or circumstance could maintain intimacy through daily calls. Elderly parents could hear their grandchildren's voices regularly rather than waiting for annual visits. The ache of separation, while never fully healed, was soothed by the knowledge that a beloved voice was just a phone call away. Distance still mattered, but it mattered less. The telephone could not replace physical presence, but it could bridge the gap until reunion became possible. Prank calls and obscene calls emerged as unwelcome byproducts of telephone anonymity. The distance and invisibility that the telephone provided allowed some callers to harass and intimidate without fear of immediate consequence. Families learned to be cautious about who they gave their numbers to. Unlisted numbers became desirable for those seeking privacy. The same anonymity that made honest conversations easier also provided cover for those with darker intentions. Every technology casts shadows alongside its light. Telemarketing emerged as a commercial application of the telephone that many found intrusive. Companies discovered they could reach potential customers directly in their homes, making sales pitches over the phone during dinner hours. The ringing phone that once promised connection with friends and family became associated with unwanted solicitations. Do not call registries were established to give consumers some control over these interruptions. The telephone had to be defended against those who would exploit its access to private spaces for commercial gain. crisis hotlines, and support services found the telephone an ideal medium for reaching those in need. People struggling with mental health challenges, addiction, or domestic violence could reach out for help anonymously, finding support without the barriers that might prevent them from seeking in-person assistance. Trained counselors staffed phone lines around the clock, offering comfort to strangers they would never meet. The telephone became a tool for healing as well as connection, a lifeline extended to those standing at the edge of despair. The telephone enabled new forms of journalism and activism. Reporters could conduct interviews across vast distances without leaving their offices. Whistleblowers could share information anonymously. Organizers could coordinate protests and movements through networks of phone trees, each participant calling a set number of others to spread the word. The telephone amplified voices that might otherwise have gone unheard, connecting individuals into movements that could shake the foundations of power. Information flowed faster, and with it, the possibility of change. International calling opened windows between cultures that had once seemed impossibly distant. Immigrants could stay connected to families in their home countries, maintaining bonds across oceans and continents. Businesses could coordinate operations globally. Students studying abroad could reassure worried parents with regular calls home. The world became a smaller place, not because distances shrank, but because communication could now leap across them effortlessly. The telephone was weaving a web of connection that encircled the entire planet. The etiquette of telephone use evolved over time, establishing norms for this new form of social interaction. When was it appropriate to call? How long should a conversation last? Who should speak first when answering? These questions had no obvious answers in the early days of the technology. Gradually, customs emerged, varying somewhat from culture to culture, but establishing basic expectations for polite telephone behavior. The telephone was not just a technology, but a social institution with its own unwritten rules and rituals. Children grew up learning to use the telephone, each generation finding it a more natural and familiar technology than the last. Parents taught proper phone manners, how to greet callers, how to take messages, how to be polite when ending a conversation. Picking up the family phone and speaking to an unfamiliar adult was a rite of passage, a small step toward independence. The telephone was woven into the fabric of childhood, a tool for reaching friends and navigating the social world beyond the household walls. The telephone booth, once a common sight on city streets, gradually disappeared from the urban landscape. Mobile phones made public payphones unnecessary for most people. The iconic red booths of London and the glass and metal enclosures of American cities became relics, preserved in some places as historical curiosities, but no longer serving their original function. A whole infrastructure of public communication faded away, replaced by the personal devices that everyone now carried. The shared technology gave way to individual ownership, and the streetscape changed accordingly. As our story continues to unfold, we find ourselves considering the sounds that telephones have made throughout their history. The mechanical bell of early phones gave way to electronic ringtones, then to personalized music and sounds. Each era had its acoustic signature, its distinctive announcement of an incoming call. The sudden shriek of an early telephone, the measured ring of a mid-century rotary phone, the digital chirp of a 90s mobile, the personalized melody of a modern smartphone. Each sound evokes its time, an auditory time capsule that transports us back through the decades. The voice quality of telephone calls improved dramatically over the generations. Early calls were thin and tinny, barely recognizable. By the mid-20th century, voices were clearer but still distinctly telephone-sounding, compressed, and slightly flat. Digital transmission in the late century improved clarity further. Modern smartphones can deliver voice quality that approaches in-person conversation. Yet, some people feel nostalgic for the older sounds, the characteristic telephone voice that marked a call as something apart from ordinary speech, a special kind of communication with its own acoustic signature. Hold music became an unexpected cultural phenomenon. When callers were placed on hold, silence felt awkward and uncertain. Was the connection still active? Had you been forgotten? Music filled this uncomfortable void, ranging from classical pieces to smooth jazz to specially composed ambient sounds designed to soothe waiting callers. The experience of being on hold, listening to looped melodies while watching the minutes tick by, became a shared irritation that united telephone users across all walks of life. We have all waited, together alone, listening to that familiar musical purgatory. Voicemail replaced the answering machine for most users, storing messages on remote servers rather than local tapes. The basic function remained the same, capturing words from callers who could not reach you directly. But voicemail became more flexible, accessible from any phone, storable for longer periods, forwardable to others. The asynchronous communication that answering machines had introduced became more powerful and more integrated into the telephone system itself. Messages accumulated in invisible archives, waiting to be retrieved whenever convenience allowed. Conference calling allowed multiple people to participate in a single telephone conversation, transforming the device into a tool for group collaboration. Business meetings could include participants from multiple locations. Families scattered across the country could gather in a shared acoustic space for holiday greetings. The intimacy of the one-to-one telephone call gave way, in these moments, to something more like a gathering, voices overlapping and interrupting in the familiar chaos of group conversation. The telephone had learned to host a party. The development of undersea cables and satellite links extended telephone networks across oceans, connecting continents that had once been isolated by vast waters. Calls that would have been impossible a century earlier became routine. A person in Tokyo could speak with a friend in London as easily as with a neighbor across the street. The technical achievement was remarkable, laying cables across ocean floors and launching satellites into orbit, all to carry the simplest and most human of things, the sound of one person speaking to another. Encryption and security became important concerns as telephone communication carried increasingly sensitive information. Early phone calls could be intercepted relatively easily by anyone with access to the wires. Modern digital encryption makes eavesdropping far more difficult, protecting conversations from unauthorized listeners. Privacy, always tenuous on the telephone network, became more robust through mathematics and technology. Yet, the possibility of surveillance never entirely disappeared. The question of who might be listening remained a quiet concern underlying every conversation. The telephone changed the pace of decision-making in ways both subtle and profound. Choices that once required days of correspondence could now be made in minutes. Negotiations could proceed in real time, adapting to responses as they came. The speed of business and personal life accelerated. Some decisions were made too quickly, perhaps, without the reflection that the slower pace of letters had enforced. Others benefited from the immediacy, problems solved before they had time to fester. Time itself felt different in a world of instant communication. Telephone numbers themselves became a form of identity. People memorized the numbers of those they cared about, carrying these numeric codes in their minds like small treasures. Businesses built brands around memorable numbers, converting digits to letters that spelled words. Your telephone number was part of who you were, an address in the invisible network that connected the world. When you moved or changed services, updating everyone with your new number felt like announcing a small transformation of self. The smartphone's ability to access the internet fundamentally changed what a telephone was. No longer merely a device for voice communication, it became a window onto virtually unlimited information. Questions that once required a trip to the library could now be answered instantly. Maps that once had to be purchased and unfolded now displayed themselves on screen, tracking your location in real time. The telephone had become an oracle in your pocket, ready to answer almost any question you might think to ask. As we drift further along in our peaceful exploration, we might consider how the telephone has shaped the concept of presence itself. Before the telephone, being present meant being physically there. The telephone introduced a strange new category, being present in voice but absent in body. You could comfort a grieving friend from thousands of miles away. You could participate in a meeting without entering the room. This disembodied presence was initially unsettling for many, but over time it became a normal part of how we relate to one another. The telephone created new jobs and entire industries. Beyond the operators and linemen of the early years, there emerged call centers staffed by thousands, telecommunications engineers designing ever more sophisticated systems, salespeople and customer service representatives whose entire workday was spent in telephone conversation. The device that had started as a scientific curiosity had become an economic engine, supporting millions of livelihoods around the world. Careers were built and lives sustained by this technology of connection. Weather emergencies and natural disasters revealed the telephone's critical importance. When hurricanes approached or earthquakes struck, families desperately tried to reach one another, checking on safety, coordinating evacuations. The telephone network itself became vulnerable to these disasters, with lines down and towers damaged. Communities learned to value the resilience of their communication infrastructure. When the phones went silent, isolation and fear deepened. When they worked, they carried reassurance across the chaos. The telephone enabled new forms of entertainment as well. Party lines in rural areas became informal social gatherings. dial-a-joke services offered recorded humor for callers seeking distraction. Radio stations took requests and dedications over the phone, weaving listener voices into their broadcasts. The telephone was not merely functional, but also playful, a medium through which people could seek amusement and connection in equal measure. Even the most practical technology finds space for joy. Language itself adapted to the telephone. New phrases entered common usage. "I will give you a call. Can you hold, please? You are breaking up. Let me call you back." These expressions, meaningless to generations before the telephone, became second nature to those who grew up with it. The telephone shaped not just how we communicated, but the very words we used to describe that communication. Language evolved to accommodate the new technology, adding vocabulary that would have puzzled our ancestors. The fear of missing calls shaped domestic architecture and daily routines. Homes were designed with telephone alcoves, small niches where the phone could rest within easy reach of common areas. People hurried home to check answering machines before the age of mobile phones. The knowledge that someone might be trying to reach you created a kind of gravitational pull toward places where you could be reached. The telephone was teaching us new forms of attention and anxiety, new ways of organizing our lives around the possibility of connection. Photography and the telephone converged in interesting ways. Family photographs often featured phones prominently, markers of modernity and status. Later, the phone itself became a camera, and the relationship reversed. Now we photograph with our phones, rather than photographing our phones. The device that was once a proud possession displayed in living room portraits has become invisible through ubiquity, so common that documenting its presence seems unnecessary. The extraordinary has become ordinary, which is perhaps the truest measure of a technology's success. The telephone raised philosophical questions about identity and authenticity. Could you truly know someone you had only spoken with over the phone? Was a telephone relationship as real as one conducted in person? These questions grew more complex as online relationships developed, but they had their origins in the early days of telephone use. The voice without the body, the presence without the flesh, challenged assumptions about what it meant to connect with another human being. Rural communities experienced telephone access differently than urban centers. For isolated farms and small towns, the telephone was a lifeline connecting residents to distant markets, medical advice, and far-flung family members. Party lines, while lacking privacy, also fostered a sense of community, neighbors aware of one another's conversations in ways that could be both supportive and intrusive. The telephone transformed rural isolation without eliminating it entirely, creating new forms of connection that bridged but did not erase the distances of landscape. The sounds associated with ending a call changed over time. The solid clunk of a handset returning to its cradle, the softer click of a flip phone closing, the tap of a finger on a red button. Each generation knew its own ritual of disconnection. The moment of ending a call carried emotional weight, the transition from connection back to solitude. Sometimes we linger, reluctant to break the link. Sometimes we rush, eager to return to other demands. The goodbye is part of the conversation. the punctuation that gives meaning to what came before. The story unfolds still further as we consider the telephone's role in romance. Long before dating apps, the telephone was a tool for courtship. Nervous suitors would work up the courage to dial a number, rehearsing what they might say, hearts racing as the phone rang on the other end. Late-night conversations stretched into early morning hours, voices growing softer as sleep approached. Love letters gave way to love calls, and the telephone became witness to countless declarations, arguments, reconciliations, and tearful goodbyes. The technology of communication became a technology of the heart. Breakups over the telephone became a cultural phenomenon, both common and controversial. Was it cowardly to end a relationship over the phone rather than face-to-face? Or was it sometimes kinder, allowing both parties the privacy of their own spaces as they processed difficult emotions? The telephone created moral quandaries that would have been meaningless to earlier generations. New technologies bring new ethical questions, and the telephone was among the first to raise the complex question of how much physical presence we owe to one another in moments of emotional weight. The telephone played crucial roles in historical moments. News of assassinations, declarations of war, and momentous decisions traveled through telephone wires. Leaders communicated with one another across national boundaries. The famous hotline between Washington and Moscow, established after the Cuban Missile Crisis, symbolized the telephone's potential to prevent catastrophe through immediate communication. In moments of global tension, the ability to speak directly, without the delays of written correspondence, may have helped preserve peace that might otherwise have fractured. The telephone introduced new sounds into the soundscape of modern life, sounds that became so familiar they faded into the background of consciousness. The hum of electrical current through wires, the distant ringing of phones in other rooms. The muffled one-sided conversations heard through walls. These sounds became part of the acoustic texture of homes and offices, so ordinary that their absence would seem strange. The telephone had added its voice to the ambient music of everyday existence. Reading about the telephone cannot fully capture what it meant to use one in different eras. The anticipation of waiting for a call, the disappointment when the wrong person answered, the delight of hearing a loved one's voice unexpectedly, the frustration of a bad connection, the satisfaction of reaching someone after many attempts. These experiences, repeated countless times across generations, form the emotional texture of telephone history. Numbers and dates tell part of the story, but the feelings tell another, equally important part. Children born in the 21st century may never understand what it was like to be unreachable. For earlier generations, stepping out of the house meant becoming temporarily invisible to the telephone network. You might miss calls, leaving callers to wonder where you were. There was freedom in that unreachability, a natural boundary between availability and privacy that required no conscious effort to maintain. The always connected world of smartphones has erased that boundary, creating new challenges of presence and attention that we are still learning to navigate. The repair and maintenance of telephone equipment sustained skilled trades for over a century. Telephone linemen climbed poles in all weather, splicing wires and replacing damaged equipment. technicians visited homes to install and repair phones. The familiar telephone trucks became common sights in neighborhoods, their presence signaling that communication infrastructure was being tended. These workers, often unsung, kept the network functioning through storms and disasters, ensuring that voices could continue to travel across the wires. Museums now preserve telephones from different eras, recognizing them as significant artifacts of technological and social history. Visitors can examine the heavy black phones of the 1930s, the colorful models of the 1960s, the early mobile phones that seemed so impressive at the time. Each device tells a story about the people who used it and the world in which they lived. The telephone has become heritage, worthy of preservation and study, a reminder of how dramatically our tools of connection have evolved. Some people collect vintage telephones, restoring them to working condition and cherishing their distinctive designs. These collectors appreciate the weight and solidity of older phones, the satisfying click of mechanical components, the warm glow of bakelite under soft light. In an age of disposable technology, where devices are replaced every few years, these old telephones represent a different relationship with objects, one of permanence and craft. Each vintage phone carries memories of the conversations it once hosted, voices long faded into silence. The relationship between the telephone and writing has been complex. Some feared that the telephone would make letter writing obsolete, destroying a cherished art form. Others noted that the telephone inspired new kinds of written communication, from telephone message pads to the text messages of the mobile era. Writing and speaking coexist, each serving different purposes. The telephone did not replace writing, but rather took its place alongside it, offering a different mode of expression for different occasions. Both ways of reaching out persist, complementary rather than competitive. As we begin to slowly wind down this gentle exploration, we might reflect on how far we have traveled together through time. From the first crackling voices transmitted through primitive wires to the crystal-clear video calls of today, the telephone has evolved beyond recognition while remaining true to its essential purpose. It has always been, at heart, a bridge between human beings, a way to overcome the loneliness of distance. The technology changes, but the longing that created it remains the same, the simple human wish to hear another voice. The inventors and engineers who created telephone technology rarely foresaw how their creations would be used. Bell imagined the telephone as a business tool, never anticipating the teenage gossip sessions or late-night romantic conversations it would enable. The developers of early mobile phones could not have predicted social media or the smartphone's transformation into an essential life accessory. Innovation opens doors without knowing what will walk through them. Each generation has found its own uses for these tools, adapting them to needs the inventors never imagined. We carry in our pockets today devices that would have astonished the visionaries of earlier centuries. What began as a simple voice transmission system has become a portal to nearly unlimited information and connection. The journey from Bell's liquid transmitter to the modern smartphone spans less than a century and a half, an eye blink in human history, and the journey continues. Technologies are emerging now that will make today's phones seem as quaint as those early wooden boxes with their hand-cranked magnetos seem to us. Perhaps what matters most is not the technology itself, but what it enables. The grandmother who sees her grandchildren's faces despite living continents away, the friend who calls at just the right moment to offer comfort, the voice that says, "I love you," across impossible distances. These moments of connection are what the telephone was always meant to serve. The wires and switches and circuits are merely means to an end. The end itself is human presence made possible where physical presence cannot be. There are those who worry that our devices have become too central to our lives, that we stare at screens when we might be looking at sunsets, that we text when we might be talking face to face. These concerns are worth considering. Technology is a tool that can serve us well or poorly depending on how we use it. But the telephone itself has always been about connection, about reaching out to another person. When we use it wisely, it extends our capacity for care rather than diminishing it. The telephone remains, beneath all its transformations, a simple thing. It carries voices, it connects hearts, it bridges the space between here and there, between now and later, between I and you. For all its complexity, for all the billions of components in the global network, its purpose is elegantly straightforward. One person wishes to speak to another. The telephone makes it possible. Everything else is detail. Fascinating detail, perhaps, but detail nonetheless. The core function has never changed. We have wandered together through more than a century of human ingenuity and longing. We have seen the first fragile experiments in Boston attics, the spreading networks of wires across continents, the liberation of mobile technology. We have heard the voices of inventors and operators, seen the changing designs of instruments that carried those voices. It has been a long and peaceful journey, and now, as the night grows late, we approach its gentle end. The story continues beyond these words, but our telling of it is nearly complete. If you have been listening as you drift toward sleep, perhaps these words have woven themselves into your dreams, images of old telephones and copper wires blending with the soft edges of slumber. That would be a fitting end to our time together. The history of connection becoming part of your unconscious wanderings. Dreams themselves are a kind of communication, messages from parts of ourselves we cannot reach by waking means. Tonight, perhaps, the telephones of history will ring softly in your sleeping mind. Whenever you wish to return to these quiet explorations, they will be waiting for you. This channel is a place of calm curiosity, of gentle journeys through the wonders of science and history. You are always welcome here, whether you come seeking knowledge or simply a peaceful companion for the quieter hours of your day. Rest now, if rest is what you need. The story of human connection will continue, with or without our attention, carrying voices across the distances that separate us. And so, we come to the end of our journey through the sleepy history of the telephone. The voices that once seemed like magic, traveling on invisible currents through copper wires, have become so ordinary that we barely notice them anymore. But perhaps, having spent this time together, you will hear your next phone call a little differently. You will remember the dreamers who made it possible, the operators who connected the early networks, the engineers who stretched the reach of human voices across oceans and continents. Every call carries within it this entire history. Rest well, and may your connections, however they come, bring you peace.